It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Well, welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnet Bain here with my co-host and confrere.
Freeman Michaels
I'm
here.
feeling continental today. What can I say to you? How are you today, Freeman?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing extremely well. I had a late night last night watching all of the political proceedings.
Yeah, you're paying attention to politics.
I'm hooked on all that stuff.
You're voting for Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah, again.
Again. Barnett keeps writing in candidates who are
Again.
dead.
Well, you know,
you can't write in candidates who are
It's
dead.
always
Barnett.
worked for me.
Why do you like Lincoln so much?
I think he understood what being a Republican was about.
That's good. That's
It's funny. We talked earlier about my fascination for Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
I gave it a little more thought this morning. And there's a modeling there of something that is so gravely absent in our culture, in our world today. There's a certain modeling of a post-heroic way of being in the world.
I love that language, post-hero.
It's no longer about conquering or even conquering our essential personalities. It's not about marrying the guy or getting the job or creating the business. All of those things are beautiful and good.
Right.
But comes a point in which there's a certain amount of discovering our own inner nature,
Yeah.
where we become intimate enough to know the terrain of our inner process, and then begins the great work of beginning to relate to the world at large as your body, as self. And that's very much evident in Lincoln, who was reviled through his first 4 years.
Yeah. He was willing to risk that people might not like him.
Nobody liked him. He was...
Well, his mother probably liked him. His cousin Louis or something.
His cousin Louis liked him. But by the time we got to the second inaugural, he gives this speech, which I want to bring this up here. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, means it's all developmentally per in the individual. Let's us strive on to finish the work we're in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations.
Wow.
So this is days before the end of the Civil War.
Right.
There is no gloating. There is no crowing.
Well, there's no enemy. There's no winner or loser in that language. This is not about
No triumph, no vindication, but a sense of creating a large enough expanse for people to feel the pain, to move through whatever is coming up, and to be large enough to hold the experience of the self and others as the self. So this, I bring this up for two reasons. One is where we have such a vacuum of leadership maturity. And then the other part of it is that from the perspective of Lincoln, he would probably say that it begins inside, that he felt himself responsible for everything and everyone, and not in a vertical way, but he identified him. He identified him as his sense of self was a mass identity, and so it begins with us. And
well, he was willing to own, as we've put on this show before, the Hall of Mirrors. He was willing to own all of the aspects of himself that were expressed in the world around him, and as opposed to pointing, he was willing to hold it all.
Hold the shadow.
Yeah, you brought this up in a couple of different contexts. One of them was the body of Christ, which is something you said.
Yeah.
That the idea of Christ consciousness is to hold the entire collective experience as one body.
As self.
As self, yeah.
I mean, I can say those things. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Experientially, I don't. I don't, but I can, like a hound dog with my nose to the scent of something, I am being drawn into a discovery of something, and maybe that's a shadow experience of it. But we could not have a more elegant way to segue into inviting our guest on. Our guest is a modern-day spiritual messenger and the worldwide best-selling author of so many works, beginning with his now famous Conversations with God series. And my dear friend, and I'm so glad that you're with us today, Neale Donald Walsch.
Welcome, Neale.
Thank you, guys. It's really nice to be here. And, you know, I think it was Lincoln who put together a team of rivals, which is what our current president, Barack Obama, has also been deeply influenced by. How to not only take what he said in that message of his second inauguration, but how to make that practical in the creation of his cabinet, his team of advisors, the people he drew around him to move through his experience. I think it was. It may not have been Lincoln, but I think it was Lincoln.
Yeah. Well, I like it. I mean, this is again, you know, from the perspective that I can see these things outside of me as reflections of parts within me. You know, I'm often personally drawn into, you know, bickering, maybe about politics or whatever. And, you know, what I love about what Barnet was sharing is this sense of greater vision, this sense that there's something beyond the tendency to want to crunch everything down to, you know, pretty small boxes, frankly, pretty small ways of viewing the world. And, Neale, what I love about your work is it's very expansive. It's about opening up to uncommon senses, to extraordinary things beyond the known. It's a relationship with uncertainty that I see as generous.
Life is not a zero-sum game, but I'm wondering how we move from saying that to experiencing it, because the observation I make is that the politics of today is tending to turn life into a zero-sum game. It's either black or white, and it's either true or false. It's either right or wrong. All the gray areas in between have been totally obliterated. Where is the presidential candidate? This isn't about one side of the issue or the other, but where's the president? Why can't Mitt Romney and Barack Obama both get up and say, for instance, just as an example about the health care thing, you know what? There were some good things in Mitt Romney's program in Massachusetts that we copied, and we did duplicate it because they were good ideas. And there were some things that we didn't like and that we eliminated because they were not good ideas. We didn't think on a national level. There are some things about this program that you're going to agree with, and things about this program you're going to disagree with. But both of us as candidates, both Mr. Romney and myself, if I'm Obama, I say this, both Mr. Romney and myself believe that things are not black and white. There are, God forgive the expression, shades of gray. And there's an opportunity for us to take a look at, do we throw out the baby with the bathwater, or is there a way to find some middle ground? What happened to the ability and the yearning and the desire to find middle ground? Why does it have to be one thing or the other? That's what I think we need to put into the space of civil discourse. Can we find maybe I'm going to write a book.
We did it. We started your next book. It was launched here.
Happened here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Well, listen, I'll play God for a minute here, Neale, and I forgive you. You said forgive me.
Thank you.
But there's a piece in here, and Barnet, I know you think about this a lot, where this zero-sum game, this shadow play, if you will, is amplified. And again, for us, it's about looking at
it's a delusion.
Yeah.
Reality is not a zero-sum game.
Right.
Dreams are not zero-sum, but by the time we shoehorn the fecundity of imagination down into logic and reason, we end up with something called a zero-sum game because we can control it and it's predictable. But it's not an ultimate truth. It's just a little box a little teeny box we live in. So I know that your work, Neale, for many years has been to unpack that box and that, as Emerson said, an institution is the lengthened shadow of the man. And I think that's true for every individual in creation. We look outside at these. We look outside at this magical, wondrous universe, and we think we're separate from it, and we don't understand, or we are now in a process of coming to a growing understanding of our direct relationship with all that is, and that that we are not separate from it. And so that in terms of a political discourse, there is something to be learned about myself as an individual from how I respond to the kind of the lack of civility.
Well, I'm saying in my new book that 98% of the world's people are spending 98% of their time on things that don't matter.
Nice.
And we're talking about that right now. That the only thing that does matter is the fact that there is no separation between anything and anyone. And if somehow we could get across that idea to the world at large, that we need to change the contextual field. We need to change the context within which we approach, experience, and express life through us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and not to be trite, but it starts with me. I mean, again, if I'm looking at my own propensity to crunch everything down to a winning game, a zero-sum game where there's a winner and a loser, and to view things that way, I can kind of see where my own heavy lifting lies.
Yeah, I think that you can't even imagine how many votes he would draw if Barack Obama was saying to the public, or if Mitt Romney was saying to the... Imagine Mitt Romney getting up between now and Election Day in November and saying, Barack Obama does not have all bad ideas. Some of his ideas are good. Mm. And one of the first things I'm going to do if I get elected to the presidency is to sit down with him and to talk with him about some of his best ideas and see if we can't find a way for the old administration and the new to work together to create a better tomorrow for all of us. I am not willing to stand up here and demonize every single solitary thing this man has thought, said, or done. Mm-hmm. Not willing to do that. Mm-hmm. And have Barack Obama say the same thing. We're not willing to demonize each other. They would have an enormous positive response from people, but nobody dares to do that. I would dare somebody to do that, and they would have an avalanche of support from both sides of the aisle.
What do you think is our, where do we have an ability to respond as individuals? And I am not referring, though I am not discounting, activism in terms of in making your voice heard, but equally, if not more powerfully, where do we have the ability to respond to these things internally as an inside job?
I think we have to, I think that where we find that space of possibility is first in determining what are we doing here. By here, I mean on the planet. Mm-hmm. Barnet, my experience has been that most people go through lives. My father, for instance, a wonderful example. He was a terrific guy, and he did great things in his life for me, and I owe so much to him. But I don't think, having said all of that he spent more than 20 minutes in his lifetime asking himself, what is my function and purpose on the earth? That is, as a sentient being, what am I up to here? And what is my purpose for being alive? I don't think that, from my observation, the majority of people ask that question. But the space of possibility to interact individually as activists in the creation of our individual as well as our mutual reality begins, it seems to me, by answering the simple question: who am I? Where am I? Why am I where I am? And what do I intend to do about that? And these are questions that I ask myself every day. When I wake up in the morning, it's my daily ritual, just kind of a ritualistic thing that I do. Look at myself in the mirror, and even though I know the questions by heart and know the answers that I gave yesterday and maybe even last night, but what are my answers this morning?
That's
Who am I?
That's it.
Where am I? Why am I where I am right now?
Right. And time spent wondering. I mean, I love the way, you responded sort of, 5 minutes ago or whatever it was, by saying, I'm wondering. I mean, that's a great way to enter into an expanded a conversation. The language again, space of possibility. There was space for possibility, and hearkening back to what you were talking about with your father, it's about, in my mind, in one man's opinion, it's about getting better acquainted with maybe even intimate with the why that's behind the what. I mean, a lot of us are doing things and have never taken the time to consider why we're doing them. I mean, what's really motivating my choices, and what do I want motivating my choices, maybe most importantly?
Yeah, I'm struck by the observation that we have 7 billion people on the planet, all claiming to want the same thing. Basically, we all want peace, health, happiness, prosperity, opportunity, security, equality, etc. We have the same shopping list, and our 10 desires, what I call the 10 desires, are roughly the same among all people, even among, startlingly enough, people we would call terrorists. At the bottom line, if you pull one of them aside and say, "What are you doing this for? What is it you want?" They'll tell you: security, peace, prosperity, opportunity, equality, happiness, health. So we all have the same shopping list. Now I got a question to ask. The room: how is it possible for 7 billion people who claim to be evolved, sentient beings? How is it possible for 7 billion of us to all want the same thing and be unable to get it?
Barnett's going to answer that, but after this break.
Right after we come back, we're going to take a moment out. We're going to pay a few bills, and we're going to come back, and we're going to toss that Frisbee around. So
stay with us.
Stay with us.
We'll be right back.
It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with my co-host, Barnet Bain. And before we went to break, our guest, Neale Donald Walsch, asked a very important question, Barnet.
It was rhetorical.
No, you're going to answer it.
All right,
I love to throw softballs to you, Barnet. So if we all want the same thing, Barnet.
You don't want the questions even larger than that.
Okay, go. Make it harder for him. Let's make it really hard.
This is my friends.
Let's place the question into context. Not only how is it possible for 7 billion of us to say we want the same thing and be unable to get it? How is it possible that we've been trying for thousands of years, not a couple dozen years, not a couple dozen decades, but for thousands of years, this species of sentient beings for thousands of years has been trying to accomplish the same thing and been unable to accomplish it? Do you suppose there might be some data missing?
That's a more juicy question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And where I come from, I immediately go to.
We haven't tried hard enough.
No, I certainly don't go to there. But we certainly have played the trying hard game.
Yes, we have.
What I love about your question, your rhetorical question, Neale, is that you threw out a clue right off the bat. There is some grand and great attractor that is summoning us into our greater possibility. This magnificent God force that we are, like a tractor beam, is pulling us toward a greater connection, a greater sense of union, a greater sense of knowing, greater sense of freedom, beyond the little structured lenses out of which we look and we perceive our little stripped down versions of reality. More and more we're drawn by this. We're all drawn by this same energy.
Yeah.
So that to me is the most self-evident, because that's the part of the question that I experience personally, not as hand-me-down knowledge. The rest, there are as many answers to that as there are human beings to dream thoughts, feelings, and choices and decisions.
I have one. So I'm going to personalize it. My impression is that our conceptual self doesn't match our actualized self. So by that I mean the concept of who I am doesn't match up with my actions, my behaviors, and so forth. There's a disconnect between the two. And so for me, again, if I personalize it, which is the only place of power I have, is I need to walk my talk. I don't see it as a global issue. I see it as a personal issue. because there's a bunch of little me's, little individuals in this collective, and I think it's easy to point to the collective and say, see the problem out there.
All beautiful. Now, Neale, I know you have...
well, there's got to be an answer from you.
You've got one or two thoughts on this
we'll
subject.
let you dive in.
Well, I think that the data that's missing is just what you both are talking about. Is it possible that there's something we don't fully understand here about God and about life, the understanding of which would change everything? And I think it is a rhetorical question in that sense, because my own answer is yes, of course. We are like, if we were scientists in a laboratory, we would be conducting this experiment, for about 3 weeks, and we'd say, obviously there's some data out. There's something we don't know, the knowing of which would alter everything. So what humanity doesn't know, the knowing of which would change everything, is that there's no separation between anything. Or humanity does know it but refuses to believe it. Or it does believe it, some of us, but refuses to act like it. Or it is willing to act like it but doesn't know how.
Beautiful. I remember a conversation with Sandy many years ago. We got into a play argument. We just pretended we were having an argument, and before I knew it, we were having a real argument. We'd forgotten that we were having a play argument. It became a real argument. So to me, this is a clue to a profound personal spiritual truth, that once upon a time in space, there was a pretend that became, well, let's pretend we are separate, and now let's pretend we're not pretending. Then we go down around this merry-go-round, this long loop of round and round and round, trying to make a love affair out of have a love affair with a straight line into something that is inherently not at all ordered in that way. And eventually, we develop, we grow, we mature, we learn, and we get to a point where so many people seem to be discussing this. And perhaps, Neale, we are at the point where there are enough people to notice, to shake a stick at, who are for whom the lights are going on, and who are beginning to lean into the idea that the only thing that has been missing is our willingness to get off of this program.
I want to think that I know you're right about that, and I want to think that there's a possibility in this moment in time that did not exist even, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago, much less 10 or 20 centuries ago. And the space of possibility that we've been talking about that has now opened up is the space that's been created by what I call instantaneosity. That is, our ability to instantaneously and simultaneously communicate with each other. That the communication revolution that puts us one mouse click away from somebody in Tibet and anywhere in the world, our ability to exchange ideas rapidly and universally, with huge numbers of people, that ability changes the game. It is in truth a game changer. And if there's anything that could create the possibility for us to finally move into the experience of the data we've been missing, although we have not been missing but have not been able to convince enough people of, if there's any game changer, it's our ability now to communicate universally and simultaneously. And that's, by the way, is why many governments of the world are now taking steps or attempting to take steps to limit people's accessibility or to shut down certain websites or to close down certain wiki operations or whatever they want to do to stop the information flow, because the power structure that's in place right now, whether it's political, economic, social, or spiritual, the power structure that's in place is very clear that the power can only remain in place when people do not have the knowledge of all things. As soon as we have the wikis of the world telling us everything about everything, the ability of a particular aspect of our society to control us vanishes. So you will see in the days and weeks, months and years immediately ahead, you're going to see governments and economic structures, corporations and so forth, doing everything they can to shut down the free and open flow of information. And Mr. Assange is simply a part of that process.
One of the things that the what you're speaking of, the way that the internet has changed our perspective, is proof that when an idea is ready, it appears in lots of places. We might have known that prior on some level, that, okay, there seems to be a shift in the consciousness in various places in the world, but we didn't have proof and we didn't have a way of putting it together so quickly. But I'm marveling at how quickly something on the internet, it doesn't show in one place; it shows in multiple places at the same time. Are you? I mean, that's a phenomenon I'm sort of personally tapped into and aware of.
In the days of my parents, my grandfather, the window of changeability was 50 years. He could literally live through 50 years without having any of his fundamental ideas about life and how it is challenged in any dramatic way. For my father, the window of changeability was around 20 years or so. He could go through 20 years of his life, but not a whole lot more, without some fundamental understanding that he held about life being deeply challenged, if not directly contradicted. In my life, that window of changeability, probably 5 or 7 years. In the life of my kids, 1 or 2 years, and in the life of my grandchildren, months before something we all hold to be true about life is challenged immediately, dramatically, and directly. So the window of changeability has reduced from 50 years to 50 weeks.
50 years to lunch. Are you kidding?
I came back from lunch, and everything was different.
Are you kidding? Things just move seismically.
Well,
from moment to moment, there is just this enormous change, and everything that we're talking about is mirrored in our capacity to hold it in the heart. And speaking personally, that has been the most profound shift in my own life, has been the movement from being fundamentally numb or processing all emotion as a mental idea to experiencing energy motion in the body and being and opening to care and opening to ideas of empathy and opening to experiences of compassion without necessarily getting sentimental or getting condescending. I mean, all these distinctions represent the most sophisticated change in me that I can point to, and I see it in the culture as well, and I see it as you're speaking, Neale and Freeman, when you're talking about wikis and you're talking about the instantaneosity of communications. We now see something that is an image that is systemic worldwide of something that is happening across the street or across the world, and our hearts open. And I believe there is a field shift. There is a systemic. I think everything changes when that happens.
Well, it's a more, in my mind, it's a more reliable processing system. It's a more reliable way.
It's a different way.
Well, yeah, and but the capacity of our ability through logic and reason to crunch everything down is limited. It's topping out, especially in the world that we see, reflected in this kind of, old mindset of zero-sum game. To go back to the very beginning of the conversation.
Instantaneosity, huh?
And our challenge is to be able to move fluidly with that, without everyone on our right and everyone on our left telling us that we've lost it, we've gone crazy. That's part of the problem. When you have 1 foot in one world and 1 foot in the other world, when you're able to move fluidly with the changes that occur over lunch, as Barnet was saying, then you come out of that and you do have empathy, you do have those emotions, you do move through those realities, you do speak from that place, and when you do, a lot of the folks, on your left and right look at you like, "Are you okay? What are you on?"
Right. This is the power of. This is why there's so much power in the speaking, and so this is one of the reasons that it's so critical to have and to develop community, so that you can be seen and that you can see and you can be heard and you can hear. That's one of the great gifts of your work, Neale, is that way out in front of what has been, thankfully, a groundswell of maturing and seasoning into this area, you are out creating a safe space for the conversation.
And when we can create that conversation, thank you for noticing that, Barnet, when we can create that conversation with our innermost highest self that I call God, and we have a conversation with God, we suddenly no longer depend solely and only on those people around us, some of whom may be in the same space and some of whom may not have any idea what in the world we're talking about or experiencing. But the higher part within us will always know because it's experiencing it with us and in fact, sponsoring the experience. So once we begin to have that regular expression that I call conversations with God, suddenly we're anchored again, but we're anchored in a different experience. The reality in which we're anchored is not the reality of all the folks around us and the collective consciousness, but really the reality of the highest place within us. That becomes our foundation, that becomes our stability, and that creates us as a brand new human.
And I think what you're talking about is a personal connection to wisdom. In the
embodiment.
Thank you, even taking it further to where it's embodied, where it's coming through us and we're aware of it and we invite it. And, I think I was educated by the Jesuits, and I know that you were brought up Catholic, and the notion of contemplatives in action, I always really appreciated that. It was sort of a Jesuit motto. But I like that there's a thought process. There's a contemplative element that empowers the choices or empowers the action. And I'm going to track back to even this idea of becoming more actualized. There's a thoughtfulness. There's an intentionality, a kind of vision, if you will, in the expressions of me that I'm very, very deliberately putting out in the world. But it really does start with this place of personal connection to wisdom, the contemplative part.
It's exactly what I talk about in this new book, which is coming out here in about a week and a half or two, called The Only Thing That Matters. And I talk about what is the only thing that matters, and it's exactly what you're talking about now. Connecting the two, connecting the soul's wisdom with the mind's intention and the body's activity. All three can function jointly and in unison, rather than your mind going one way, your body going a second way, and your soul going a third way. And that is the only thing that matters. In the book, The Only Thing That Matters, I answer the question, how do we at last unify the tripart being that we are, such that our movement through the world speaks from one place?
And what can you share with our audience now as both tease and gift of what lies in store for us when we all read this book?
I think the teaser would be that we have to, the book helps us to decide what is that agenda of the soul. The reason that the body and the mind often move in different directions from the soul and do not reflect the agenda of the soul is that the body and the mind have not come to clarity, in many cases have no idea, in fact, what the agenda of the soul is. That is the agenda of the individuated soul as well as the agenda of the universal soul, what I call the one. So the first step in that process, and what we offer in the book, is an invitation to explore what the possible agenda of the unified one might be and what the individual agenda of one's self might be as well. And we offer a process in the book that allows people to at least get closer to that, to open that invitation and to say, because again, I'm going to tell you, my father died at 83. I don't think he ever asked himself, what is or was the agenda of my soul? I know what my body was trying to do here: health, happiness, peace, prosperity, get the guy, get the girl, get the car, get the job, get the house, get the office in the corner, get the bigger car, get the grandkids, get the illness, and get the hell out. I understand that whole process, what my mind and my body were trying to do, but did I ever take 5 minutes to ask, wait a minute, what does my soul try to do? We ask the question in the book, and I invite people to wake up every day and ask themselves this question: how does what I'm doing right now serve the agenda of my soul? But
Beautiful.
Of course, I couldn't even begin to answer that question until I asked the first question: what in the world is the agenda of my soul? And that's what the book is all about.
It's a fantastic question, and we're glad that you took the time today.
It's the only question.
It's the only question. The only question that matters. There may be other questions, but this is the one that matters. And I think that's...
Until the next question arises. But right now, that is the cutting edge for me as well. And I am grateful to you, Neale, for reminding me of the very most fundamental question that matters to me.
Absolutely. I feel the same way.
So
Listen,
this book is going to be out in 3 weeks, you said. What is that date for those of us that are listening on podcast?
It'll be on or about October the 10th.
Okay. So
a bit more than 3 weeks.
Wonderful. So in terms of folks wanting to get this, links to websites, anything you'd like to give our audience so they can...
They could just go to Amazon.com or any of the online bookstores.
Perfect.
And just look for the book. The title is The Only Thing That Matters.
The Only Thing That Matters. And we are so thrilled, Neale, that you took the time to spend with us today to discuss the things that matter to you and to talk about the soul. It's a gift. And we look forward to having you back.
Thanks, pal. Nice to be here.
All right. And for those of you listening, we were going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back, so stay with us here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with my co-host Barnet Bain. Just got done talking to Neale Donald Walsch. Amazing guy.
Yeah, quite a lot to chew on there.
Take a moment to consider what your soul's agenda is. Take 5. Take 5 every day. Take 5 many times a day.
I don't know. There's a part of me. I'm going to confess. There's a part of me that is has a whole side conversation going in this piece of my brain. I saw Neale not that many months ago, and it seems to me he was about to, I'm hoping he was well into the book at that time, but I think he was about to write this book, and now it's going to be out in 3 weeks.
He downloads. Look, the whole Conversation with God series was a download. So I know the third book took him 4 years, but the other ones I think were quick.
To be a champion for my friend, he would make the distinction that it was not channeled,
right,
nor downloaded as people understand that.
Okay.
He was a very real conversation for him, but it was written.
Yeah. Well, okay, then let me just speak for myself, because I recognize that things that are coming to me creatively come in spurts, and I can't totally master how they're going to come or when they're going to come.
Well, you're pointing to something huge here. I mean, I have made a life of working with artists.
Yeah.
And
writing.
And any artist understands that the creative moment, the creative inspiration itself is a gift.
Yep.
It is not something that is crunched, or it's not something that's labored. It is received as a gift from some part of us that is beyond logic.
I love when Tim Crean
I
was
just
on.
want to put the other
okay,
piece
go
on.
ahead.
The other piece to that is that the unraveling of that gift, the unwrapping of that gift, that is hard work.
Yes, it is.
That is really hard work. But the inspiration of it is a gift of spirit. Inspiration.
I love it. And when you had Tim Kring on, who of course created the show Touch and created Heroes and others, Crossing Jordan, he was talking about how do you describe his relationship with his muse? It's a fantastic description of how his muse is a little shy, and it was like this whole, you could kind of imagine what his muse looked like. It's tapping into another frequency, maybe a self. I don't know.
It's totally another frequency.
Yeah.
I mean, when I have that experience, I start the day in search of that experience, first of all. But it puts me very much in the frame of knowing that by myself I can do nothing.
Yeah. Well, what I loved about it, though, is he's describing his muse in such a way that you're thinking, does he sit down to tea with his muse? How's this go? Because it had so many. I know it is, and that's why that was what I was marveling at. I know we're supposed to be talking about Neale right now, but anyhow,
well, it's the same. It's very much the same conversation. Neale has a relationship. He has an internal relationship with that which gifts him with his insight and his understanding.
Absolutely.
And then he also stewards the manifesting part of himself that has to do the heavy lifting of crunching it down, getting it on paper. And it's a balance between the receiving and the will in action.
Totally. Yeah, and the idea that it's an invitation and it's an answering of a call and all these other pieces are also layered in there. Let's talk about this. The only thing that matters. I love it. And I think, it's interesting because you know this about me. I've come to a place, in fact, you were the one that languaged this to me first when I was sort of proclaiming, here's what I'm all about. And you said, and you bet your life on it. It's the only thing that matters. That's the language you said to me. And I was like, I'm willing to bet my life on it. This is what matters to me. And to say that, which, and it's a full body thing. It's a mind, body, spirit, as Neale was kind of illustrating, of saying, I'm fully committed to my own evolution, to this possibility that I'm willing to, inviting, open to, that I know will take me into uncertain territory, because that's the nature of the journey. It's not crunching back to what we've done in the past. It's something that's yet unknown, and yet it beckons us. It draws us like a destiny, quietly nudging us, or not so quietly in some cases, towards something that is ours to discover and be discovered by.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, as we have this intentionality, this formal intentionality, this is the deepest truth for me that I am able to be in touch with. That I'm fired up around investigating and exploring consciousness and issues to do with spirituality and creativity. This is the highest truth that exists for me, and my life at this point is an expression of choices that are made, fundamental choices that are made in alignment with that. And at any moment, there could be a happy accident that comes in below the threshold of my awareness, below the threshold of my aware intentionality, that moves me from being all about writing and making movies to suddenly I'm doing radio shows with Freeman. It's just it's an example.
No, it's a great example.
We're open to suddenly.
It's a great example.
In the very next moment, the truth for me now, and in 10 minutes it might be an obsolete truth, but something may happen that completely redirects my life. It's not going to redirect my character and my values at this point, nor the function of my passions, wanting to explore creativity and consciousness, but I could be entirely redirected into a completely different experience of it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The only thing that I would say would be consistent would be the qualities, that the underlying qualities, the substantive qualities would probably be consistent in some way.
Destiny, in that sense, I used to believe, I was certainly taught, if not directly by the culture and by the stories that we consume and the entertainments and religious teachings, and at least the way I understood them as being presented to me, which may have been inaccurate, that destiny was something extrinsic to me. And now I understand it differently, that destiny is self-chosen. The expression of that is a combination, like all our creative pursuit, of lots of will and action and an openness to a happy gift.
And the muse, the little invitations.
That's where
all
she comes
along
in.
the
That's where
way,
they
these
come in.
little invitations, these little balls that drop in particular ways, that if we pay attention to them, the signs are there, and the path that we find has little bits that we're very naturally attracted to, that we find our way along. And the challenge, I think, for most of us is to actually listen, is to do the contemplative piece, to stop long enough, to wonder, as our friend Neale came in, I'm wondering. I love that's such a great way to enter
wondering,
a conversation.
Curiosity.
I'm wondering. I'm wondering.
Gay Hendricks likes to talk about this. He does this wonderful thing, chin in hand, and he goes,
It's hitting your upper limits. What would it be like for me to move beyond the things that I've
just
defined?
Curiosity.
For me? Yeah, just the ability to wonder and wonder. And
so I have another one that I add
on
on to. Along with the curiosity, there is there's patience.
Yeah.
And I have not had a very comfy relationship with patience. Very uncomfortable relationship with patience. Sandy's constantly telling me I'm impatient, and I'm constantly getting triggered. Oh, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. So it's first sign that there's something up there. I would hate to think I'm impatient. I better look again. But this patience thing, this quality of being comfortable enough in my own skin to sit silently observing, contemplative in the unknowing of things, willing simply to observe and wait for whatever arises.
Yep.
That's also a gigantic force for creativity and authenticity, discover more and more of who I am and who we are. But it is new ground.
Yeah, for me it's huge. I've been talking about it in terms of sitting with my discomfort, because the tendency is to want to leap out of my own skin and go do something about it versus sitting with the parts of me that get scared, sitting with the parts of me that you get inspired even. Sometimes, it's about really
How do you do it?
Sitting, not very well. Sometimes I do it okay, but other moments I'm very aware. And look, the process for me is aware that I'm running ahead of myself and to slow down. I mean, for me, self-regulating and slowing down and taking time in this contemplative piece is more than important. It's critical for me personally. Or else something else takes over.
So when you're talking about slowing down, you mean slowing down enough to see that some of the choices and behaviors are habits and not necessarily
that's where I was that was where I was getting to right now, is that if I don't, then I find I'm on a track that is again, as you say, someone else, it's a hand me down, or it's just a habitual. It's a pattern of, most of my patterns are defensive. They're ways I learn to survive and get my needs met and so forth and so on, but they're not the best expression of another part of me, an emerging part of me that, as Neale was saying, has wisdom, that is more tapped in. And that stuff comes in quietness, it comes in stillness, it comes in moments when we're not pushing and doing and so forth and so on. It's hard. I mean, our culture has that immediacy. Is that the word?
It was a great word. How did it for those of you that have joined late, we were speaking with Neale Donald Walsch, and Neale tossed out a new word that he has crafted called immediosity,
which we may be repeating a few times in the show.
Not
just this show,
I think
but
it's like a euphemism for fastness.
Yeah. And
an old word, but speedy.
Yeah. So look, paradoxically, the response to all the speediness in our lives may be to slow down. I'm not prescribing that. I'm just saying, I'm wondering, maybe that's a good idea. I know for me that when I take the time to breathe, there's a wisdom.
I don't think I breathed this morning.
Yeah, have you breathed this morning?
Been very shallow. I think I've drawn breath down like maybe to my Adam's apple. I don't feel like, until you've pointed it out, I don't feel like I've had a really good chest full.
Yeah. Well, look, you got your chest full, and we've had our time.
It's
was
over
fun.
already. That was quick.
It's always over quick when we're having fun.
Well, we're usually having fun.
Yeah, I know. But that's why we do it. And
well,
we
great
hope
to see you.
Yeah. Are we shaking hands?
But you don't want to shake?
That's nice.
Or shake it on camera.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you had fun. And I really hope you come back next week and tell your friends. And keep listening to Cutting Edge Consciousness.